The wind carried a whisper through the trees that night, soft, uncertain, almost like a prayer slipping between trembling lips. It was the kind of night when every sound seemed louder than it should be, when the world felt like it was holding its breath. The lanterns along the dirt road had burned out long ago, leaving only the dim glow of a waxing moon that struggled to break through the clouds. The tiny village of Hollow Creek lay still, its wooden houses huddled together under the weight of silence, as though afraid to stir. Only the old church bell, swaying gently in the cold wind, seemed awake, its faint clinking the heartbeat of a place forgotten by time. Down the slope, where the road forked toward the river, a young woman hurried along, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her boots were caked in mud, and her breath showed white in the air. Every few steps, she turned to look behind her, though nothing but darkness followed. She wasn't supposed to be out past sundown. Folks in Hollow Creek still spoke of things that moved unseen after dark, voices that called from the woods and footsteps that never matched the living. She used to laugh at those stories, but not tonight. Tonight, the air itself seemed to whisper. Her name was Lily, and she was the preacher's daughter. The quiet one, the one who always sat in the front pew with folded hands and eyes lowered, as if afraid of her own reflection in the hymn book. She had lived her whole life under her father's strict gaze, in a house that smelled of candle wax and old verses. But lately, something inside her had begun to stir, an unease she couldn't explain. The world beyond the churchyard fence had started to call to her. That evening, a letter had come, slipped under their door. The handwriting was rough and unfamiliar. It said only, "If you wish to know the truth of Hollow Creek, come to the old mill by the river after sundown. Come alone." Lily had read it 3 times, her heart racing faster each time. The old mill had been closed for years since the accident that took the lives of 3 men when the grinding wheel gave way. Folks said the place was haunted, that on certain nights you could hear the creak of the wheel turning though no hand touched it. Her father had warned her never to go near it. But the letter had said truth, and she'd been living in questions for too long. Now, as she neared the edge of the woods, the path narrowed into a tunnel of trees. Branches brushed her shoulders like cold fingers, and the murmur of the river grew louder. She lifted her lantern, its dim light swaying. The glow caught glimpses of her pale face, the silver cross at her throat, the tremor in her hands. She was brave or foolish enough to keep walking. Behind her, something moved. A crack of a twig, a faint breath of movement. She froze, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. Only the wind, pushing through the leaves. She started walking faster. Then a voice came from somewhere in the dark, low and almost amused. "You shouldn't wander this way, miss. Roads like this don't lead home." Lily spun around, holding her lantern high. The light caught the outline of a man standing a few paces away, tall, with a dark coat and a hat pulled low. His face was half in shadow, but she could see the curve of a smirk playing on his lips. He looked out of place like he didn't belong to this quiet little world. I'm not lost," she said, trying to steady her voice. He took a slow step forward, the gravel crunching under his boots. "Then heaven's kind to me tonight," he said with a wry tilt of his head. "For it's rare to meet an angel walking alone after dark." Lily's pulse skipped. She couldn't tell if he was mocking her or saving her from her own fear. "You shouldn't call me that," she said, her tone barely a whisper. He chuckled softly. "You wear that cross like it means something. Out here, faith doesn't always keep the wolves away." For a long moment they just looked at each other, the lantern's flame flickering between them, throwing quick flashes of light across his sharp eyes and the nervous set of her mouth. Something about him unsettled her, yet there was something familiar in the way he spoke. "What are you doing out here?" she asked finally. "Same as you," he said. "Looking for the truth." Lily frowned. "You got a letter too?" He didn't answer right away. He looked past her, toward the trees, as if listening to something distant. "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe I've been following something else." The wind shifted, and the faint smell of smoke drifted through the air. The man's expression hardened. "You shouldn't go to that mill," he said. "Not tonight." "Why?" "Because some truths don't want to be found." Lily tightened her grip on the lantern. "You don't understand. I have to know. He studied her for a moment, then sighed, brushing dust from his sleeve. Then I'll walk with you. The woods don't take kindly to lonely travelers. They went on together, their footsteps soft against the dirt. The moon slipped free of the clouds, and for a brief moment, the world brightened. The pale light, revealing the river glittering through the trees and the faint silhouette of the old mill ahead. Its tall shape loomed like a sleeping giant, its roof caved in on one side, its wheel half sunken in the mud. Lily's breath caught. It's still standing, she whispered. Barely, he said, though sometimes ruins hold more life than the living. As they neared the entrance, the air grew colder. The man stopped suddenly, his hand brushing her arm. Listen, he said. At first there was nothing, then she heard it, a faint hum, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through wood and stone. The grinding wheel. It was turning. Lily stepped forward, fear mixing with curiosity. Do you hear that? He nodded slowly, eyes narrowed. Yeah. And if that's not the dead, then someone's been waiting for you. Her fingers tightened on the lantern. Inside the mill, light flickered. A candle or a flame, faint but deliberate. Someone was there. She turned to him. If you're afraid, you can wait here. He gave a short laugh. Afraid? No. But I'll admit I'm curious to see what kind of truth calls a preacher's daughter out past midnight. She hesitated, feeling the weight of his words. There was something in his tone, a mix of warning and respect, that unsettled her more than any ghost story could. Still, she pushed open the old door. The hinges groaned like a living thing. The scent of old grain and damp wood filled her lungs. Inside, the candlelight danced across the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move. On the table near the back, a folded paper waited. Another letter. She reached for it, her hand trembling. Behind her, the man spoke softly. Before you read that, you should know. Hollow Creek's truths don't come cheap. Lily glanced back at him, her voice low but steady. Neither does faith. And then she unfolded the paper. Her eyes widened, her breath catching as the words bled into focus. The lantern shook in her hand. Outside, the wind roared through the trees, and the faint hum of the mill wheel grew louder, almost thunderous. The man's smirk faded as the light flickered, painting the two of them in gold and shadow. Whatever secret the night had been holding, it was about to reveal itself, and neither of them would leave unchanged. Then, from somewhere deep within the mill, a door creaked open, and a voice, not the man's, spoke her name. Lily froze at the sound of her name. It came softly, almost like the whisper of a breath caught between prayer and warning. The candle flame wavered, its light shivering across the broken walls. She turned her head slowly, afraid to look but more afraid not to. The man behind her stood perfectly still, his eyes narrowed toward the darkness that stretched beyond the edge of the flickering light. For a moment, neither of them moved. Only the wheel outside groaned, the rhythmic sound rising and falling like an old chant that refused to die. The voice came again, this time a little clearer, though it seemed to drift from somewhere deep within the mill. Lily. It was soft, familiar somehow, but too distant to place. She swallowed hard, clutching the paper tighter in her trembling hand. The man took a cautious step forward, his boots scraping against the floorboards. Don't answer, he said quietly. Not yet. She turned to him, her voice shaking. You heard it too? I did, he said. And I'd rather not hear it again. Lily looked down at the paper she'd unfolded. The writing was the same as before, rough, hurried, as though written by someone desperate or afraid. It read, if you're reading this, the river has already taken what it was promised. The truth lies beneath the wheel. Her eyes darted toward the sound of the turning wheel outside. What does that mean? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, as though trying to decide whether to believe her or not. Finally, he said, it means whoever wrote that knew something about the accident. Maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Lily felt her stomach tighten. The story of the mill accident had been told her whole life. 3 men killed when the main wheel cracked and collapsed into the river. People said it was cursed afterward. Her father had been one of the first to preach that no good came from digging into old sins. But now, standing in the same mill that should have been abandoned, she began to wonder what he hadn't told her. The man stepped closer to the wall, running his fingers over the damp wood. See this? He said, pointing at faint marks carved near the doorframe. They looked like letters, though weather and rot had worn them down. Someone left these here on purpose. Not initials, more like a message. Lily lifted her lantern. The carvings caught the light, forming a pattern. It wasn't a name at all, it was a date. August 12th, 1873. That's the day of the accident, she said softly. He nodded. Maybe not just the day of it. Maybe the beginning. The wind pushed through a broken window, making the candle gutter again. Lily glanced back at the table. The paper still lay open, the ink slightly smeared where her thumb had brushed it. The words beneath the wheel echoed in her mind. She looked toward the outside door where the old water wheel creaked and moaned under the moonlight. I need to see it, she said. The man frowned. You can't, it's half sunk. Dangerous as sin, I don't care. There's something out there. He studied her for a moment as if trying to read the reason behind her resolve. You're not going to stop, are you? She shook her head. Then I'm not letting you go alone. They stepped outside together. The night had grown colder, and mist drifted from the river like breath from a sleeping beast. The moonlight caught the surface of the water, silver and restless. The wheel stood at the edge, its heavy frame leaning into the current, each turn groaning as if burdened by memory. Lily walked closer, her lantern casting ripples of light across the muddy ground. It's still moving, she said quietly. It shouldn't be, the man muttered. The mill's been dry for years. She crouched near the base of the wheel, peering into the dark water. For a moment she thought she saw something glint, a piece of metal, or perhaps a reflection. Then the wheel jerked, and she stumbled back. The man caught her by the arm. Careful! Her lantern nearly slipped from her hand. Something's down there, she said breathlessly. Something caught in the spokes. He squinted toward the moving wheel, then stepped into the shallows, his boots sinking slightly into the mud. He reached for one of the lower beams, prying at it. It's stuck fast, he said. Looks like a piece of chain. Lily knelt at the edge, holding the lantern lower. The light fell over the dark water, and for a split second she saw it. A shape, long and pale, tangled beneath the wheel. She gasped and stood quickly. There's something there. He looked up sharply. What did you see? I don't know, she said. It looked like a hand. The man stared at her, his face unreadable in the faint light. Then he glanced back at the river. If that's true, he said quietly, then whoever wrote that letter wasn't lying. They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of water and the slow grind of the wheel filling the air. Then he turned to her. Tell me something, Lily. Why would someone send you that letter? Why not the sheriff or your father? She hesitated, the lantern trembling slightly in her grip. I don't know, she said. But my father, he used to work here. Before the accident, his eyes narrowed. He never told you that? She shook her head. He said it was sinful to look back on the past. Said the mill was a place cursed by greed and pride. But if he knew something, then maybe that's why he didn't want you coming here, the man finished for her. Lily looked away, her throat tight. Maybe he was protecting me. Or maybe he was hiding something. A distant sound broke the stillness. A soft metallic clang like something striking the inside of the mill. They both turned sharply. The man drew a slow breath. We're not alone, he said. Lily's pulse raced. Do you think someone's following us? Or waiting? They moved cautiously toward the doorway again, every step deliberate. The air inside the mill felt heavier now, carrying the damp scent of the river mixed with old dust. The candle on the table had burned low, its flame small but steady. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, except for one thing. The letter. It was gone. Lily's breath caught. It was right here. The man scanned the floor, then the corners of the room. Someone's playing with us. A faint rustle came from the upper floor, where the beams sagged and the stairs leaned dangerously to one side. The sound of footsteps, slow, dragging as if someone was taking care not to be heard. Lily's hand went to her chest. There's someone up there. The man's jaw tightened. Stay here, but she caught his arm. No, if something happens, then at least one of us might still get out, he said. But there was a strange softness in his voice when he added, Don't move until I say so. He started up the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. Lily stood below, her lantern held close, her eyes fixed on the darkness above. The sound of his boots faded, then stopped. The silence pressed against her ears, then came his voice, low, uncertain. Lily, you need to see this. She hesitated only a moment before climbing after him. When she reached the top, the air felt colder, as though the walls themselves held their breath. He was standing near the far end, pointing to something on the floor. It was another candle burned halfway down, and beside it, another note. She bent to pick it up. The handwriting was the same again, though shakier this time, as if written in haste. The river does not forget. The ones who drowned were not the only ones meant to pay. Lily looked up at him, her voice trembling. What does it mean? He stared out the cracked window toward the river, his jaw set. It means whoever's behind this isn't finished. The boards beneath them creaked suddenly, loud and sharp like a cry. Both of them turned toward the sound. The floor near the far corner sagged under its own weight, and then, slowly, began to split. Through the widening gap, the faint glow of something below shone through, cold and silvery, like moonlight on water. Lily took a step back, her heart hammering. What is that? The man crouched, peering through the crack. There's something under the floor, he said. Something buried. Before they could speak again, the air shifted. The door below slammed shut with a violent echo that rattled the walls. The flame of the candle blew out. For a heartbeat, there was only darkness and the sound of the turning wheel outside. Its groan rising into a low, almost human wail. Then came that same voice again, closer this time. Lily. But now it wasn't calling. It was warning. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Lily could hear nothing but the pounding of her heart and the faint grind of the water wheel outside, turning as if on its own. The air inside the mill felt wrong, too still, too heavy, as though something unseen was breathing just out of sight. She could feel the man's presence close behind her, his shadow stretching across the broken boards. The voice that had called her name still echoed faintly in her mind. It hadn't sounded like a stranger. There was something in the tone, familiar, sorrowful and pleading. She wanted to believe it was her imagination, yet deep down she knew it wasn't. Who could be down there? She whispered. The man didn't answer. He was crouched near the split in the floor, brushing aside splinters and old dust. His lantern cast an unsteady light through the crack, revealing something glinting below. He reached down, trying to shift one of the boards. It didn't move easily, but after a moment it gave a creaking sigh and lifted slightly. There's something buried, he said. Looks like a box. Lily knelt beside him, the boards creaking under her knees. A box from the accident? Maybe, he said. Or maybe from before. They pried up the rest of the plank, revealing a small wooden chest half buried in dirt. It was waterlogged and covered with grime. The metal lock rusted nearly to dust. The man pulled a small knife from his coat and wedged it under the latch until it gave way with a brittle snap. When he lifted the lid, the faint scent of decay escaped into the air. Inside, wrapped in rotted cloth, lay a small leather-bound book and a rusted pocket watch. Lily stared at them, her hands trembling. Whose things are those? He took the watch, brushing mud from the back. There were initials etched into the metal, J.H. He looked up slowly. You said your father worked here before the accident, he said. Lily nodded. Yes, but his name wasn't. She stopped. Her breath caught as a memory surfaced. There was another man. He used to visit our house when I was little. My father said he was a friend from the mill. His name was Jonah Hale. The man turned the watch over in his palm. Then this belonged to him. Lily frowned, confused. But Jonah died in the accident. He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, Then why would his watch be buried up here, above the river, and not down where he fell? The question sank into the silence like a stone into deep water. Lily didn't answer. She couldn't. Something about the way her father had avoided talking about that night began to make sense now, though she wished it didn't. Before she could say anything more, a sound came from below, the faint thump of something hitting wood. Both of them froze. Then it came again, louder this time, as if someone was striking the underside of the floor. The man's jaw tightened. We need to get out of here. Lily shook her head. Not yet. We're close to something. He stood, scanning the dark corners of the mill. Whatever's down there doesn't sound like it wants to be found. But Lily had already taken the small book from the chest. Its pages were stiff with dampness, but she could still make out bits of faded handwriting. The ink had run, yet certain words stood out. Debt, river, promise kept. The last line made her stomach twist. He said the preacher's daughter will never know. Her hand trembled as she read it aloud. The man's expression hardened. Your father was involved, he said. Lily looked up sharply. No, she said quickly, though the denial sounded thin even to her own ears. He's a good man. Good men do bad things when they've got something to hide, he said. And this looks like one of those things. The boards beneath them creaked again, this time not from the wind or their movement. It was heavier, deliberate. Lily's eyes widened. "Someone's down there," she whispered. He grabbed her arm. "Then we're leaving." But before they could move, the floor near the far corner gave a violent shudder, splinters flying as one of the planks snapped open. Dust and dirt billowed upward, and from the gaping dark below came a sound like a wet gasp. Lily stumbled back, covering her mouth. The man pulled her behind him, his hand instinctively reaching for the lantern. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low but steady. From the hole came a low murmur like words caught in water. The light trembled across the edge of the opening, revealing nothing but darkness. Then something shifted. Just a shadow, but enough to make the breath catch in Lily's chest. She whispered, "It's not possible." The man backed toward the stairs, pulling her along. "Don't look at it, move." They made it halfway down before the wind outside rose sharply, slamming the mill door open. The candle below had burned to nothing, but the lantern light glinted off something near the table, a footprint, fresh in the dust. Lily's voice trembled. "Someone else has been here the whole time." He nodded grimly. "And they wanted us to find that box." As they stepped out into the cold air, the sound of the wheels seemed to follow them. It turned faster now, as if stirred by unseen hands. The river below churned darkly, swallowing moonlight and silence alike. They walked up the hill toward the dirt road without speaking. When they reached the crest, Lily stopped to look back. The old mill stood against the horizon, its roof sagging, the faint glimmer of lantern light shining through its cracks. It looked alive in a way that made her uneasy. "Where are you staying?" she asked. The man shrugged. "Nowhere particular. Just passing through. Then why come here?" He hesitated, then said, "Because Hollow Creek isn't the kind of place you pass through without hearing stories." "I came to find out if they were true." Lily glanced at him, uncertain. "And what kind of stories have you heard?" He looked out over the dark fields. "About a deal made by 3 men the night before the accident. About how only 2 bodies were ever found." Her breath caught. "2?" He nodded. "The third was never recovered. The records say he was swept away, but the river doesn't carry everything off. Some things it keeps." Lily turned her gaze back toward the mill. "Do you think that's what's buried there?" "I think your father knows more than he ever told you." The word stung, but she didn't argue. Part of her had begun to suspect the same thing. As they walked toward the village, the mist thickened around them, blurring the edges of the trees. The faint outline of the church steeple appeared in the distance. Its bell hung silent, like a sentinel that had forgotten its purpose. When they reached the crossroads, the man stopped. "You should go home," he said. "Pretend you never came out tonight." Lily looked at him. "You really think I can?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "Then be careful who you ask for answers. Some folks in this town have been lying so long they don't know what the truth feels like anymore." She nodded slowly, then turned toward the path leading to her father's house. The lantern light wavered as she walked, and for a moment she thought she saw someone standing near the church gate, a figure in a long coat, watching her. But when she blinked, it was gone. Inside the house, everything was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Her father's Bible lay open on the table, a ribbon marking a passage she couldn't remember him reading before. She stepped closer and saw the verse underlined in faint pencil. "For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor secret that will not come to light." The words made her chest tighten. She turned toward the hallway that led to her father's room. His door was closed, a faint line of lamplight glowing beneath it. "Father?" she called softly. No answer. She pushed the door open slowly. The lamp on his bedside table flickered weakly, and the room smelled faintly of ink and oil. Her father sat at the desk, his back to her, motionless. For a long moment she thought he was asleep, but then she saw the small folded paper resting on the desk in front of him. Her name was written on it. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Outside, the wind howled through Hollow Creek, rattling the shutters and carrying with it the far-off groan of the mill's wheel still turning, steady and unbroken. And as Lily unfolded the note, the candlelight caught the faint shimmer of dried river mud on her father's sleeve. The letter in Lily's trembling hands felt heavier than paper had any right to be. The ink had bled in places, as though the words themselves had tried to escape the page. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable, neat, deliberate, and painfully familiar. The faint lamplight trembled across the lines as she began to read. "If you have found this, then I've failed to keep the past buried. The truth of Hollow Creek was never meant for you, my child. But the river remembers what men try to forget. Do not return to the mill. What sleeps there should remain unspoken. Forgive me." Lily's knees felt weak as she lowered the letter. Her father hadn't turned. He still sat at the desk, his shoulders hunched, his breathing uneven. For a moment she couldn't move or speak. The old clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the seconds that seemed to stretch into eternity. "Father," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, "what did you do?" He didn't answer. His head tilted slightly, as though he had been listening for her voice all along. "You went there," he murmured, his tone slow and heavy. "The mill," she swallowed hard. "You knew I would," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. His face looked older in the flickering light, carved deep with years of worry and something darker. "Guilt. There are places where the Lord's mercy does not reach," he said quietly. "That mill is one of them." "You worked there," she said, her words trembling. "You and Jonah Hale and who else?" He hesitated. "Eli Turner," he said at last. "He was the foreman. We were desperate men then. The harvest had failed, and the mill was all the town had left. Jonah came to me with an offer, something he said would save Hollow Creek." "What kind of offer?" Her father's eyes flicked toward the Bible on the desk. "A pact," he said simply, "with promises no man should make. We thought it was only talk, but that night by the river, Jonah spoke words that weren't his own. He said if we gave what the river demanded, it would give back tenfold." He believed it. Lily's heart pounded. "And what did the river demand?" Her father's voice faltered. "A soul." The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. The sound of the wind outside seemed to vanish, leaving only the faint crackle of the dying lamp. "You mean someone died," she said softly. "That accident wasn't an accident, was it?" He turned his gaze toward her, eyes shining with something between sorrow and shame. "Jonah fell," he said. "The wheel took him before we could stop it. The river swallowed him whole. But after that, the mill prospered again. The grain flowed. The town flourished. We told ourselves it had been fate. But fate doesn't send letters 30 years later." Lily stepped back, her breath catching. "Then who sent it?" Her father looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "That's the question that's kept me awake for months." Before she could speak, a sudden knock echoed through the front door, slow, deliberate, and hollow. They both froze. "Who would come at this hour?" Lily whispered. Her father stood carefully, his face pale. "No one who brings peace," he said. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 steady strikes. Lily's pulse raced as she turned toward the window. Through the thin lace curtain, she saw a figure standing near the gate, a man in a dark coat, his hat low, his face hidden in shadow. The same man she had met by the river. "It's him," she breathed. Her father frowned. "Who?" "The stranger from the woods. He was there when I found the letter." Her father's expression tightened. "You spoke to him?" "Yes," she said. "He said he came to learn the truth about Hollow Creek." Her father's hand trembled as he reached for the door. "There's no truth left worth learning." He opened it a crack and the stranger stepped into the doorway, rain dripping from his hat. "Evening, Reverend," he said softly. "Didn't mean to intrude." Her father's voice was cold. "You're trespassing." The man glanced at Lily before replying. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just come to collect what the river's still owed." Lily felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What are you talking about?" He looked at her with a sadness that didn't match his words. "Your father didn't tell you everything, did he?" Her father's hand tightened on the doorframe. "That's enough." The man stepped inside anyway, the floorboards groaning under his boots. "You buried Jonah's watch under the mill," he said. "You and Eli both. You thought hiding it would end it." Lily's voice shook. "How do you know about that?" He turned to her slowly. "Because I've seen what the river keeps." The lamp flickered, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw water dripping from his sleeve, dark and glistening. Her father's voice rose, anger and fear twisting together. "Get out of my house!" The man didn't move. His eyes, cold, distant, met the Reverend's. "You prayed for forgiveness, but you never gave back what was taken. The river's patient, Reverend, but not forever." Before her father could reply, the lamp blew out, plunging the room into darkness. Lily gasped as a sudden gust swept through the house, rattling the windows and knocking the Bible from the table. The stranger's silhouette blurred in the dimness. When the light returned, he was gone. The door swung slowly open again, banging softly against the wall. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, heavy and relentless. Lily clutched her shawl. "Father, what did he mean? What does the river want now?" Her father turned toward her, his voice hollow. "It wants balance." The next morning, the storm hadn't stopped. The streets of Hollow Creek were washed in gray, and the river ran high, nearly spilling over its banks. People whispered about the preacher's house, the strange light seen before dawn, the sound of voices raised in argument. Lily ignored them all. She had only one thought in her mind: the mill. Her father had locked himself in his study before sunrise. She had heard him praying, low, broken words she could barely understand. When she knocked, he didn't answer. On the third try, she heard his voice. "If you go, don't come back." But she went anyway. The road to the mill was slick with mud, and the air carried the sharp smell of rain and river water. When she reached the bridge, she saw someone already there, Eli Turner. He was older now, gray at the temples, his back bent but his eyes still sharp. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Lily," he said softly, "you shouldn't be out here. You knew Jonah," she said. "You were there that night." His expression hardened. "Your father should have kept you from this." "He tried," she said, "but I need to know what happened." Eli looked toward the river, his jaw tight. "Jonah was the one who started it. He said he'd found a way to save the town. Said the river spoke to him. We thought he was mad. But when the crops failed and the debts came due, desperation makes men listen to madness. So you helped him?" "I helped your father stop him," Eli said. "At least I thought we did. But when the wheel broke and Jonah fell, I saw your father's face. He didn't look shocked, he looked relieved." Lily's heart pounded. "You mean he let it happen?" Eli nodded slowly. "We buried what was left that night. But the river wasn't fooled. It never is." A loud crack split the air, the sound of wood snapping under strain. They both turned. The mill stood across the river, its wheels spinning wildly, driven by the rising current. Lily started toward it, but Eli caught her arm. "Don't go in there," he said urgently. "It's waking again." She pulled free. "If my father won't face it, I will." The bridge groaned under her weight as she crossed, rain pelting her face. The air was thick with the smell of wet wood and iron. The door to the mill swung open before she even touched it. Inside, the lantern she'd left was still burning, though she was certain she'd taken it with her. Its flame burned blue, casting strange, shifting shadows across the walls. The wheels turning echoed like a heartbeat, deep and rhythmic. Then she saw him, the stranger, standing near the broken floorboards, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "I told you not to come back," he said quietly. She took a shaky breath. "Who are you?" He looked down at the spinning wheel. "Once I was someone who believed in promises. Now I'm what's left of them." The water surged beneath the mill, louder now, almost roaring. The boards trembled underfoot. Lily stepped closer, her voice trembling. "What does the river want from us?" His gaze lifted to hers. "It wants what was promised, a life for a life." Lightning flashed through the broken windows, lighting the room in stark white. For a moment, she saw the truth written in his face, the hollow, washed-out look of someone who had drowned long ago. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jonah?" He smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Took you long enough." The mill shook violently, the sound of splintering wood rising like a scream. Water began to pour through the cracks in the floor, swirling around their feet. Outside, the river had broken its banks, and as the lantern's flame flickered one final time, Jonah's voice cut through the roar. "The river remembers, Lily. It always remembers." The night after the storm, the air hung heavy over the valley. The clouds had finally drifted west, leaving a silver moon gliding over the quiet village. The dirt road, once swallowed by rain and mud, now shimmered faintly under the pale light. The church bell stood silent, its shadow falling long across the broken fence near the old oak. It was the first peaceful night in weeks, yet it didn't feel peaceful at all. There was a strange stillness, as though the earth itself was listening for something, waiting. She stood by the window of the small boarding house, her hands resting against the sill, eyes tracing the outlines of the hills. Everything that had happened replayed like a memory she wasn't ready to accept. She could still hear his words, low and uncertain, the ones that had shattered the veil of fear between them. In that dark forest where the air felt alive with something unspoken, he had risked his life for hers. And yet, even now, she didn't know whether to trust what her heart believed or what her mind still doubted. Downstairs, the fire had nearly gone out. The old innkeeper snored softly by the hearth, his head tilted back. She could smell pine smoke, wet wool, and the faint scent of coffee gone cold. She thought of how strange it was, how quickly people had turned from whispers of suspicion to quiet gratitude once the truth began to surface. The man they'd feared, the one who walked alone through the fields at dusk, wasn't what they thought. He wasn't the devil they whispered about in the church pews, or the outlaw they warned their children of. He had carried something heavier than sin, something human. She had seen it in his eyes that night, right before the lantern went out and the thunder broke. There had been guilt, yes, but also grief. He had lived his life on the edge of the village's scorn, not because he'd done wrong, but because he carried the memory of what others had lost. The fire that burned through the mill years ago, the one that took half the town, had also taken his family. He'd been the only one left standing, and sometimes survival makes a man a stranger even among his own. When she'd first come to the valley, she'd thought herself a visitor, a teacher from the city, sent to bring reading and reason to a place untouched by time. But the more she stayed, the more she saw how people here lived by faith, by old fears and older hopes. They believed in curses, omens, and blessings that came with a price. And now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't so sure they were wrong. That night, she decided to see him one last time before she left for the station at dawn. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, the cool air pressing against her skin as she stepped outside. The village slept in silence. Only the faint creak of the windmill and the sound of crickets filled the dark. She followed the path that led out toward the hills, where his cabin stood beyond the stream. As she walked, she thought of the words he had spoken when he found her lost in the woods that first night. "If you're lost, then heaven's kind to me tonight." She hadn't understood then, but now she did. He hadn't been mocking her. He'd been admitting something rare, a flicker of hope, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The moonlight guided her across the bridge, its boards slick from the rain. She could see the faint glow of the lantern from his window, steady and warm. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if her presence would be welcome. But before she could decide, the door opened, and he stepped out as if he'd known she would come. His coat was worn, his hair damp from the night air, but his eyes held that same quiet steadiness she'd come to recognize. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her as though words might break the fragile calm that had settled between them. Finally, he nodded toward the porch. "You shouldn't be walking this late," he said quietly. "I needed to see you," she replied. "Before I go," his brow furrowed slightly. "You're leaving?" She nodded, though the word felt heavier than she expected. "The school's closed for now. The children, their families are moving east after the harvest. I thought it might be time I did the same." He looked down, his hands tightening on the railing. "I figured you would. Folks like you don't stay here long." Something in his tone stung her, though she knew it wasn't meant to. "Maybe I would have," she said softly. "If things were different." For a moment neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and the distant hum of the river. Then he turned toward her, his voice low but certain. "You don't owe this place anything," he said. "Not after all it's taken." She shook her head. "It's not about what I owe. It's about what it gave me. I came here thinking I was supposed to teach people how to see the world differently, but maybe I was the one who needed to learn how to see people." He looked up then, meeting her eyes with something like gratitude. "You did see them. You saw me." The silence between them deepened, no longer uneasy but tender, filled with everything that didn't need saying. She thought of how much had changed in such a short time, how fear had turned into understanding, and how sometimes the hardest thing to do is to forgive what can't be undone. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small carved cross. It was simple, worn smooth from being held too often. "Found this near the old mill," he said. "Figured it might belong to someone from town. Maybe you could return it." She took it gently, her thumb brushing over the wood. "It belonged to the preacher's daughter," she whispered. "They said she lost it the night of the fire." He nodded. "Seems right, it found its way back through you." They stood there for a long while, watching the horizon pale as dawn crept closer. The sky turned from charcoal to rose, and the world began to breathe again. Birds stirred in the trees, and the first hints of light touched the edge of the valley. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with both sorrow and peace. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." He gave a faint, almost tired smile. "No need. Just keep walking toward the light even when you can't see it. That's what my father used to say." She smiled back, tears glinting in her eyes. Maybe heaven's kind to both of us tonight." Then she turned and began the slow walk back toward the village, the wooden cross warm in her hand. Behind her, the cabin door closed and the faint glow of the lantern flickered one last time before fading into morning. By the time the train whistle echoed through the valley, she was ready. The fields glistened with dew, and the wind carried the smell of wild sage and damp earth. As the village disappeared behind her, she felt a strange calm settle inside her, a sense that some things, once broken, could still be mended in the quiet ways people remember each other. And somewhere beyond the hills, under the same rising sun, a man stood watching the light break through the clouds. The shadows were still there, but for the first time they didn't frighten him. The world hadn't changed, but they had, and that, in the end, was enough. The valley would keep its secrets, the people would tell their stories, and life would go on. But for those who had looked into the dark and seen the truth, it would never look the same again. That morning, as the wind swept through the quiet village, carrying the first warmth of the day, it felt as if the earth itself sighed, soft, forgiving, and alive once more.